Hi, I'm talking today with Robin James. Robin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. Let me kick us off. I will read a little taste of your Amazon bio, and then we'll launch into talking about your favorite thriller.
All right.
Robin James is an attorney and former law professor. She's worked on a wide range of civil, criminal, and family law cases in her 20-year legal career. She also spent over a decade as supervising attorney for a Michigan legal clinic assisting thousands of people who could not otherwise afford access to justice. Robin now lives on a lake in southern Michigan with her husband, two children, and one lazy dog. Her favorite pure Michigan riding spot is stretched out on the back of a pontoon, watching the faster boats go by. So, Robin, my wife is from Michigan. Where on the
hmm
hand are you from?
I
That's
am, let's see, I am right here. I'm about, no, just not very far from the Michigan border,
okay.
or I
My
mean
wi-
the Ohio border.
my wife
No.
is from Grand Blanc, and
Okay.
she has some friends who live in Honor or have a cabin
hmm
in Honor up by
hmm
the Sleeping Bear Dunes,
Right.
and we
Right.
go up. We go up there from time to time.
Yeah, we always say in Michigan that the hand thing is one thing, and the other thing is we'll say we're going up north, which means anywhere, could be anywhere. And when you tell someone from Michigan, yeah, I'm just going up north for the weekend, no one questions it. Or to the lake.
Mm-hmm.
There's thousands of inland lakes in Michigan and no one
Nice.
questions. Which,
So tell us a little bit about you and your writing.
well, I am a legal thriller author. So all of my protagonists are attorneys. They are thrillers, so it's definitely some suspense and life and death type stuff going on. Um, I have my first legal thriller came out in January of this year. So this is a newer endeavor for me, although I've been published in different genres under different pen names for a lot of years. But so yeah, I've got the niche is strong female protagonist, small town lawyer taking on the world pretty much.
Nice. So, Robin, here's probably the most important
hmm
question of the interview.
Hit me.
If you could have an unlimited supply of one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be? Whether that's duct tape or sushi, or what would it be?
Unlimited supply. It would probably be something like Reese's peanut butter cups, like the
Mm,
little ones that come in the foil packs.
right. That is an excellent answer. I have to say, I'm very impressed. I might choose the same thing.
I'm thinking.
Anyway, so we're talking about your favorite thriller, and the thriller you want to talk about is The Firm by John Grisham, which is actually one of my favorite thrillers too. It's at least one of my favorites that I've read. I only read it last year, and it's one of my
Really?
favorites that I've read in the last few years. Yeah, I'm not so much up on the classics, even though
Right.
it's a modern thriller, but it's probably a
I would
classic by
say.
now.
Right. I would call The Firm. I had a really hard time trying to pick which would be the legal thriller. And it's not even my favorite. But it is in my opinion, legal thriller of the modern era that kind of kicked off that whole genre.
Can
So, but
you
yeah,
can you give us like a spoiler-free synopsis about the book?
a spoiler for it is about a young, hungry lawyer who takes the dream job of his life, and it turns out it was a deal with the devil. So then the rest of the book is how he is dealing with the choices that he made and trying to get out of it with his life.
What do you think makes it the definitive legal thriller?
Well, it was, and most people have either read the book and or seen the movie. So a lot of times it's hard to even talk about the book without also talking about the movie because you got Tom Cruise and it was kind of the perfect movie in terms of the everyman David and Goliath story. But I think Grisham just does a fantastic job of just taking very dry, what could be very dry material. There's a lot of legal and financial stuff that forms the plot, and just somehow making it into a simple, understandable, page-turning ride, if you will.
Hmm.
So, and from the beginning who the bad guy is, and the second on page one, yeah, this is a bad deal. Like, these people are not what you think they are,
Hmm.
but you just kind of go along the ride the entire time to see how he's going to get out of it.
Yeah, I'm a perfect example of someone who knows nothing about the law and nothing about
Uh-huh.
legal matters, and I was never confused.
Right.
I was never confused by the plot or the minutia of
Hmm.
the legal stuff. So yeah, John Grisham did a great job of explaining it for the non-law people.
Right.
So the hero of the book, can you tell us what makes that hero so compelling?
Well, I think Mitch McDear, who is the main protagonist, he's comes from kind of a poor, poverty-stricken family in the South, and he manages to overcome that and ends up at Harvard Law at the top of his class. And he's just on the cusp of being able to kind of flip his life script and have everything he's ever dreamed of for himself and his wife. And he gets this amazing offer at this fantastic firm with all the perks, and it's right there for the taking, and he takes it. And then he turns out that it's this Trojan horse of evil things that he's got to figure out where is he gonna go along and just sell his soul to the devil and take the money and run or whatever, or is he gonna try to get out of what he signed up for?
Mm-hmm.
But so you go along with him that whole way.
I remember liking Mitch from that first chapter. John Grisham did a good job because the kind of reader I am, if I don't care about the main character by the end of the first chapter, I'm probably not going to continue on because
Right.
unless a book has really relatable characters and some way I can see myself a little bit in that main character,
Sure.
I'm not really interested in continuing on.
Right. And for me, at the time I read it when it first came out, and then I reread it last week leading up to talking to you. And I will say that I had two very different experiences, but we can talk about that too. But the first time I read it, I'll date myself, that's fine. I was a senior going into my senior year of college. So I knew I was headed for law school when I read this book. And I also had a lot of friends that were on the same path. And I'll tell you, when we first read it, it was kind of like, well, this sounds like a pretty good deal. Like, how do I get this offer? I want to work for this firm. But so, yeah, it really spoke to me at that level because I was at that point in my life where this could happen to me. And then when I read it last week, I had a much different experience because I've been an attorney for a long time, and there are aspects of the book that I don't think quite hold up to more modern sensibilities. There's a lot of cringy things that are kind of borderline. He's not too great. At least Mitch isn't so great describing women in the book. So, like, my 48-year-old self and my 22-year-old self had a different experience, but I still marvel at how well he's able to take those dry, complicated things and make them approachable for every reader.
Nice. That's interesting. Yeah, there have been a couple of books that I've read across a couple of decades span too,
Yeah.
to out myself as an old person. And I've definitely had a different experience. It's interesting to go back and read something after you've had a lot of life experience versus
Right.
reading it as someone who maybe hasn't, ever had a job or had to pay a mortgage. You read books a little differently.
Right.
So, on the opposite spectrum from Mitch, can you tell us a little bit about the villain without getting too much into spoiler territory?
Well, the villain is really the firm itself. And then, there's a couple of individual lawyers within it that Mitch has contact with. But the villain is a much bigger, more nebulous thing. I think he's fighting against the external, which is what he's being asked to do from the firm and the consequence. And from the very beginning, he's being watched by different factions. And that from the beginning, the way Grisham writes it. He's writing in third person, and within the first two chapters, that there is this sinister overlord, if you will, that is watching his every move. But and then the real villain is the crime family, and I'm not really spoiling anything by telling that, but you don't really see them. The Moralto crime family that's behind the firm isn't really something that's ever talked about concretely. They're just kind of there. But I think the struggle for Mitch is really obviously dealing with, and even the FBI is somewhat of a villain in the story as well, because he's not really trusting that they're going to deliver on the promises they make him. So he's kind of against 3 or 4 different major villains throughout the entire book.
What do you think makes it so page-turny?
Well, I mean, part of it, I think, again, reading it the second time around, especially after you've been a writer for a while, I don't know if it's this way for you, but I can't read books the same. You're always kind of looking at like, oh, how did he do that? Or how much time did you spend talking about? I think that Grisham is very, like, his prose is very simple and approachable, and he doesn't spend a lot of time on narrative description. It's either all dialogue or this happened and this happened and this happened. So there's really not a lot of downtime in it. So, and if he's got that perfect blend of being in Mitch's head and what he's struggling with, and then he'll throw in, while this thing is happening with Mitch, the whole time he's being watched by whether it's the feds or the evil forces within the firm that are tapping his phones. So there's always that constant, he never lets off on that constant, the evil eye is on Mitch the entire time. And then the end, I won't, again, not spoiling it, the last third of the book is really where the adrenaline-fueled suspense comes in, where Mitch is actually in a fight for his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one nice thing about knowing who the villain is from the outset, is that the danger's coming. And whether or not Mitch knows it, you as the reader know it's coming. And so that always adds an extra element of tension, because maybe you know more than Mitch about what's going on.
Right.
So do you think the firm has a theme?
Sure. I think the obvious theme is that David and Goliath fight. Mitch is just this nobody, really, and that's kind of why they hire him in the first place, because he's hungry and he's not independently wealthy, and he needs the firm to get what he thinks he wants, what his brass ring is. So, and he's fighting against, again, the FBI and the mafia and this powerful, rich law firm. And it's, through most of the book, you can't figure out how he's ever going to get out from under any of it. Even if he wins, he loses, because he's going to have to give up all of these things that he has worked so hard for. There's also that deal with the devil aspect to it, which has been part of, going back to Greek mythology. So there's a lot of, I think, common themes that are throughout the book.
I know they made that movie with Tom Cruise, like you mentioned.
Yes.
Didn't they also make it into a miniseries?
I am not as up on the other iterations, and I know there was they made an attempt at a sequel series on television.
Wow.
But I never watched it. I didn't even know that until I started doing some research back into the book. So apparently it didn't do very well. But yeah, there have been other attempts to and it's a great story. Even part of some of my own books is that question of like, well, what happens to Mitch after the firm?
Yeah. So
I'm not the only one asking that question.
John Grisham he hasn't written series, has he? Aren't most of his books standalone?
He's got a few that are, I think, in the same world, but I don't think he has actually a series for younger, like a young adult series where he follows a young lawyer type protagonist, but most of his books are standalones. Yes.
Have you read a bunch of his stuff? Like, are you a John Grisham devotee?
I wouldn't call myself a devotee. I definitely was into his earlier stuff, like The Firm. I think A Time to Kill, which was the book he wrote before The Firm, but that didn't go he didn't get anything traction-wise publishing until The Firm hit. The Pelican Brief is another famous one that they also made into a movie. But at the same time, it was John Grisham. As far as legal thrillers, you had John Grisham and Scott Turow, who Scott Turow is probably most famous for Presumed Innocent, which was also a movie with Harrison Ford. I can't say that I've read much of his more recent stuff, and part of that is just because, as writers, I don't have as much time to do reading for fun, and I tend to not read in the genre that I'm writing very much, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. I like to read very widely. I'm actually just reading Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials.
Okay.
The Golden Compass and that
Mhm.
that trilogy. I never read it before. It's amazing.
Right.
Um,
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty eclectic too with my tastes. But
yeah. Who are your other favorite thriller authors?
Um, well, I would say for sure Stephen King would be who I'd consider the master of suspense, as does everyone else. Um, Again, as far as legal thrillers, I'm a huge fan of Scott Turow. To be honest, I might even be a bigger fan of Turow than I am of Grisham, although I respect Grisham because without Grisham, there wouldn't be, I probably wouldn't be selling what I'm selling.
Right.
So I would say those are my and Dean Koontz, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about where he's going next with his
Mm-hmm.
Amazon publishing deal. But so yeah, I would say for my thriller reads, and Dan Brown for sure. I'm trying to think as far as indie. I like the Jack Reacher. Well, though he's not indie, I like Jack Reacher. I've been reading some of Dawson's stuff lately as well.
Mm-hmm.
So all over the place, pretty much.
All right. Robin, what book of yours do you want to tell us about today?
My series, at the moment, I have one series out that follows, my protagonist is Cass Leary, so it's the Cass Leary legal thriller series. Book one of that is called Burden of Truth. And so I would say if I was telling anyone who wants to know or get into my stuff, I would tell them to start with Burden of Truth. All my books are written as standalones, but they involve the same protagonist. So it's best to read them in order, but you don't have to read them in order. But yeah, that's the book that I would recommend for book one for me.
Tell us about the book. What's it about?
Well, my book has some similar themes to The Firm. My protagonist is actually someone who is a former mob lawyer who has gone back to her small town roots to start over because of things that happened with the firm. And Burden of Truth follows, as she goes back to town to kind of rebuild her life, the high school hero basketball coach gets murdered. And Cass is, she's on the court-appointed defense docket, and she gets assigned to the case of the girl accused of killing him, I should say. So that's where the book's starting point is. So she's dealing with basically the town completely against her because the hero's been murdered, and also her acclimating to life after having that big firm mob lawyer job. And it's definitely a suspense.
Nice. Sounds interesting. Is there anything else that you want us to know about? Anything you wish I would have asked you? Now's your chance.
Now's my chance. Well, okay, in addition to, I've got 4 books out in the Cass Leary series. Number 5 will be coming out in November. I'm also, I've got my own podcast that I've just started that's geared towards assisting mystery thriller authors. It's called the Mystery Thriller Author Resource Show.
Nice.
And what we do on that show is with my background, I'm an attorney for 20 some years. My husband is a career police detective. I have a very close friend who was a TV anchor and news reporter who writes in the cozy mystery genre. So the two of us got together, and what we're basically doing is interviewing crime-solving experts. So episode 1, we talked to a career police detective about, we call it Detective 101. You know, how did you get to be a detective? What's your day-to-day like? So that's what we're trying to do, is talk to other experts in the field. We've got a coroner lined up. We've got lawyers, like anybody that you'd want to know more about if you're writing or even reading crime thrillers. So those are the things I've got going on.
That sounds really cool. I think that would be of interest not just to writers, but also to people who like to read that kind of fiction. Would probably be interested.
That's what our thought process is when we're putting them together. It's like, what do you, if you like this genre, what would you want to know about who the real people are?
Nice.
And our experts all talk about, like, what are their favorite books or movies that they think are getting it right? And then what are the things that drive them absolutely crazy about, we would never do that in their real life.
What was the name of that podcast again?
It's called the Mystery Thriller Authors Resource Show. Okay. And I can send you a link.
Great. Also, I think we should point out that you are not the Robin James who is the illustrator of the children's
No.
book Serendipity series.
No, I am not. I wish that I could draw, but I cannot.
Because I have several of those books upstairs in my son's room, and you are not the same person, so we should make that clear.
Nope, I am not.
All right, well, Robin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been great to talk to you.
You too. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.